Hello there, welcome back to Inde-Car on, what is it today? It's the, bear with me a moment, okay, it's the 15th of April today. Now, there's a few things in the news. A couple of politicians have been saying things, and I think one of the funnier things that I heard being said by a politician was the fact that Pete Wishart has claimed to have been amused to find that there are 3 other people who are standing as candidates in his constituency, which begs the question, really, why would he be bemused by this, unless he felt that he had a sense of entitlement to remain the MP for Perth? I don't know, but it seems to me that he appears to be completely complacent about this. I think he's going to win, and the fact that 3 other people have shown up and thrown their hats in the ring means that somehow or other he's going to have some competition for his seat. I think this is a good thing rather than a bad thing. Now, the other former politician, I use the word former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, also former Chancellor Gordon Brown, has claimed that there are more forces trying to tear the UK apart than there are holding it together. So I have to ask, really, what these forces are that are tearing apart the UK. And to my mind, the real forces that are tearing apart the UK are the political parties in England, because it is the Tories and the Labour Party who are annoying the Scots the most. Because if the Labour Party is serious about winning the next general election, and it's planning just to simply keep going doing the same things that the Tories have been doing for the last goodness knows how many years, 20 years, it feels like longer, then the country is on the road to ruin, because we know that the Tories have been corrupt. They've been siphoning money off to their friends, they've been selling everything off, and the country is pretty much bankrupt. And a symptom of that actually is another piece of news which I noticed in the Defence Journal recently, which is that the sister ship to the United Kingdom's aircraft carrier flagship, the Queen Elizabeth, and that is the Prince of Wales, supposedly an identical aircraft carrier to the Queen Elizabeth, which was meant to be leading a voyage of discovery to America last year, but couldn't because it broke down on the way, is now being stripped for spare parts at Rosyth to actually replace some of the things which are broken on the sister ship, the Queen Elizabeth, including a massive chain which is used for the aircraft lift, which lifts their very expensive F-35 airplanes from the hangar below decks onto the flight deck. And so that chain broke, and rather than contracting out a new chain, which they felt was going to be more expensive, they simply stripped one off the sister ship. Not only that, but they've also stripped parts from the propulsion propellers from the Prince of Wales to replace broken ones on the Queen Elizabeth. So we seem to have one aircraft carrier which is basically there to provide spare parts for the other. Now, according to the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence, the idea of cannibalising spare parts or swapping them from one ship to another is not uncommon in the Royal Navy. But you need to ask the question, is this something which is going to keep on happening? According to the Ministry of Defence, it will not affect the operational role of the sister ship, and they claim that the Prince of Wales will go into service as planned on time. So I think the idea here was really just to keep the Queen Elizabeth going and spend the time and the money repairing its sister ship. Now, one of the other things which has cropped up in the news a lot recently is the Commonwealth Games. Now, I always laugh when I hear Commonwealth being bandied around as a word. The Commonwealth used to be supposedly the notional wealth of the former United Kingdom's colonies. So countries which the United Kingdom had conquered and asset stripped, but which had then decided that they didn't want to be British anymore, formed part of this alleged Commonwealth. But what Commonwealth is left? There doesn't seem to be any wealth left anywhere at all, because nobody apparently wants to host the next Commonwealth Games. And because the next Commonwealth Games is actually slated to happen in 2026, and nobody has decided they want to do it, the Australians have backed out, claiming that it's too expensive and they can't afford it. The United Kingdom has, for some reason, considered the idea of Glasgow re-hosting the Commonwealth Games after it did so in 2014. However, this is met with a lot of not so much opposition, but incredulity by local Glaswegians who've had a look at their city and are appalled at the state that it's in, and would be embarrassed if Glasgow did end up having to host the Commonwealth Games in 2026, given its current condition. And many of the people who commented in news items about this were actually pointing out the state of the city centre, particularly places like Sauchiehall Street, which had been a tree-lined avenue at one time and is now being dug up. All the trees have been basically taken out and destroyed. They can't replant them. And for some reason there's something wrong with Sauchiehall Street that's going to take months and perhaps years to put right. So that part of the city is looking pretty ugly, and that wasn't the only complaint. The potholes around the rest of the city are so chronic that people cannot drive around the city for fear of breaking their cars. Now, the reason this is happening is due to the Commonwealth, or rather the lack of wealth. The United Kingdom doesn't have any wealth, and therefore it's cutting spending everywhere, including in Scotland. And remember that the Barnet formula, which is used to calculate Scotland's share of spending within the United Kingdom context, is based on a percentage of whatever England spends on its infrastructure. And because that's being cut, the funding to Scotland has been cut as well. So local people who claim that the Scottish Government are to blame, or the local authorities are to blame, are really aiming their anger at the wrong place. The place where the money comes from, and where it should be coming from, is our own taxation, which we should have access to anyway, and yet we only get 60% of it. 40% of what we earn in our own tax revenues is withheld by the United Kingdom to be spent in other parts of the United Kingdom, for the common good, presumably. But leads me back to this issue of Commonwealth. There isn't any Commonwealth, there is now just common poverty, so perhaps they should rename the games the Common Poverty Games, because none of the former colonies of the United Kingdom, which make up this so-called Commonwealth, have any money to do anything at all. And frankly, I think many of the world's athletes look on the Commonwealth Games as a kind of warm-up for the Olympics, because the Commonwealth is literally tiny by comparison with the global athletic community. So I think perhaps we're looking at a lot of weird things going on at the moment. We have Pete Wishart claiming to be bemused that other people are running against him in a general election which hasn't even been declared yet. Gordon Brown's claiming that there are more forces tearing apart the United Kingdom, which is strange considering that the United Kingdom is doing everything in its power to entangle Scotland more and more in the United Kingdom by piping our oil south of the border, closing our refineries, and linking up our renewable energy system with England so that we can basically cable up the English grid and supply them with the energy they can't produce themselves. All of which really is telling me that Scotland is being entangled even more in the United Kingdom. It's not tearing it apart, not in the sense of physical connections. You can't tear apart an island, but you can tear the people apart. And that is being done by the United Kingdom itself, by pissing off 5.5 million Scots constantly, by basically, I suppose, siphoning off all our natural resources for use in England. They're not making us happy. And it's that pressure from within which is forcing Scotland and England apart. It's not anybody trying to tear it apart. And no political party, and let's face it, not even the SNP, is promising to tear the UK apart in any form of independence that we would recognise in any kind of time frame that would be realistic, or with any sort of process which would lead to the actual breakup of the United Kingdom and the independence of the Scottish state. The Prince of Wales, well, the poor old Prince of Wales aircraft carrier, I think, is basically like a weak twin. It's like the Prince of Wales and the Queen Elizabeth were born at the same time, but one of the twins was always there to give organ donations to the other. And I see the Prince of Wales as being that. It basically exists to provide spare parts for a ship which they knew had faults right from the beginning. And it's a ship which, if the escalating problems in the Middle East are anything to go by, the United Kingdom is going to want to use, because there's not much point in spending billions of pounds worth of public money on an aircraft carrier and all these incredibly expensive fighter jets unless they're allowed to go and shoot at something. And it seems that the Iranians have obligingly provided hundreds of targets for both American and British and Israeli jet fighters. This, I think, is being blown out of proportion. Remember that the Israelis attacked, they attacked basically a consulate belonging to the Iranian government and killed some of their officials. The Iranians then told the Israelis that we were going to attack them, and then obligingly did attack them, giving them plenty of warning. So this was really a gesture, I think, from the Iranians saying that you killed our guys, we're going to fire our missiles at you, as a gesture, as a balancing act. None of these countries, neither Iran, Iraq, or Syria, or any of the other Arab states, or Israel, or America, or Britain, actually wants a big conflagration in the Middle East, especially at a time when the real threat to Europe is actually coming from Russia at the moment. So I think in the round I would suggest that the Commonwealth no longer exists, and certainly not in the way that was intended by the United Kingdom. There is no wealth in the Commonwealth. There is just common poverty, and Scotland is suffering probably just as much, if not more, poverty induced by lack of funds being returned from the English government to the Scottish government, which should be here and should be available for our councils to spend, so that if our city is chosen for the Commonwealth Games, and we do end up staging them, that our roads are fixed, our infrastructure all works, Sauchiehall Street is rebuilt and looks lovely. Perhaps the Commonwealth Games might actually be the catalyst for getting these problems sorted out. You never know. Anyway, that's about it from me today. There isn't much news, and if you're like me and you trawl through all of the news feeds all across the United Kingdom, you'd be hard pushed to find anything relevant to Scotland anywhere. It is simply a bunch of photographs of old castles. I'm even seeing feeds on Facebook and my other social media accounts of English natural heritage popping up, which I don't really want to see. And then pictures of Scottish castles, pictures of historic figures, but no actual news of any worth at all which is relevant today. Anyway, that's about it for me today, but I think we're looking at our ships breaking down. I'm talking about Britain's military ships here, a lack of Commonwealth anywhere in the Commonwealth, and Pete Wishart thinking that he's in a comfy position when he really isn't, and Gordon Brown making his gums flap and saying that their force is trying to tear the United Kingdom apart. Well, he's been saying that for a long time. But that's about it for me today. I wish there was something more interesting to tell you, but unfortunately, this is the United Kingdom. Nothing interesting ever happens here. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Bye for now.